I am thrilled to welcome Ben Beard. This is the first time that we are actually talking face to face. We've done some email correspondence and everything. Why am I talking to Ben Beard? It's because, well, we're going to be talking next month about a book that he wrote, a movie book, a 277 page or so movie book called The South Never Plays Itself, which you can pre-order right now on Amazon and I guess wherever you got books being sold. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, well, it is a film about, well, it's a book about films relating to the way the South has been portrayed in cinema since the inception of the art form, leading up to, very present day. It says From Birth of a Nation to Green Book, and I cannot wait to talk about Green Book with you.
Yeah.
And everything that implies.
Right.
But no, so we're going to talk about this in depth next month because I'm reading it. It's not out yet. What I just showed you was an advanced reader copy, so it's very exciting. But tonight we're going to talk about 1985's Fright Night from Tom Holland. One of the reasons we're talking about this, aside from the fact that it's an amazing film, is in our correspondence talking about setting up the interview for next month, discovered that we're kind of both horror nuts. We love the genre. So I'm thinking, well, I got to have you on because it's October, it's scary season. This is going to be great. So let me just throw it over to you, Ben, because I haven't let you get in hardly a word edgewise. Thank you for coming. And what do you think of Fright Night?
Well, thanks, Ian, for having me on. First off, it's a pleasure. I'm excited. So I hadn't seen this movie in probably 30 years, and I rewatched it this week. And I'll say that the first thing that struck me is that I watched Fright Night on USA Saturday Nightmares, which was a show that's kind of like the show he's watching in the movie. Now, it doesn't have a host, but like they showed B grade and a couple of A-list, but mostly B grade horror films on Saturday nights, and I had to sneak around to watch them. So it like put me back in my own head. I'm 12 years old. I'm in my parents' garage apartment watching this same movie, and I grew up in Pensacola, Florida, which is like a beachy sort of suburban-y area. And it was like a weird revisit, and I'll say the movie's charming, and it does a lot with a small budget. And I feel like my first thought was there's like two or three sets in this whole film. And it feels like the suburbs of everyone's dreams. It like you kind of fill in the gaps. And yeah, I because I work by association, sort of. I was thinking of all the other movies I watched around it on, Saturday Nightmares, Rawhead Rex, which is about like a pig demon in leather, Basket Case, which scared the shit out of me as a kid. Yeah, but anyway, at House. But Fright Night, anyway, I thought my first thought was like, it's not doing anything new with vampires at all, but it has 3 spectacular death scenes. And it's charming. It's like a charming film.
I think that's a great way to put it. I had seen this movie a lot when I was a kid. It was one of those great horror movies that, I was way too young to watch it, but I think my dad let me stay up and watch it. We might have even rented it or something like that. But I had not seen this in at least a decade, possibly more closer to 20 years. I don't remember the last time I put in Fright Night. And so watching it again this week was like an entirely new experience, partially, I think, because this is the first time I'd watched it in high definition. I got a Blu-ray, I think, for my birthday this year. And I forgot how bright this movie is, not just in terms of the color, because even in the vampire's house, there's that beautiful stained glass window. Yeah, and there's all sorts of vibrancy going on. But
right,
the high school kids, and I use that term very loosely,
right?
The high school kids, they inhabit a world that, like, they go to a local diner. It looks like the Max out of Saved by the Bell. I mean, everybody's in these bright 80s colors. There's neon everywhere. It's not this kind of a gothic vampire movie that I remember from when I was a kid. And that might just be because we didn't have high definition back then. So it was all like kind of this gray VHS quality, dark movie. But yeah, there is something, I don't know. I'll agree with you. I don't know that it did anything new for the vampire genre, but watching it now, I really appreciate that this was perhaps my first introduction, even though I didn't know exactly what to call it, to not exactly horror comedy, but this really knowing horror kind of pop sensibility. This isn't a gothic, horrific vampire movie that's out to scare the hell out of you and be relentless and kind of brooding. It's fun. It knows what it is. And the Peter Vincent character, played by Ronnie Mcdowell, who's that late night horror host, he's he's fighting vampires on TV, but he doesn't believe them in the real life because this is set in a world where that doesn't exist, at least as far as real people understand them. So it's realistic that when a high school kid comes to him and says, "Hey, a vampire has moved in next door to me, I need your help," he's like, "I play this guy on television." And
Right.
but I really connected with the characters this time around in a way that I didn't before. When I was a kid, it was all about the kills and, "Ooh, am I going to see some sexy vampire or a vampire victim next door? I'm not supposed to be watching this kind of thing." But watching it now, it's a great highfalutin sounding, this is going to sound really highfalutin, kind of meditation on aging and skepticism. Because when I look at Roddy McDowell's performance in this movie, it's so moving and so oddly tender that like I don't know how he didn't win an Academy Award for this, or at least a nomination. I know why, because it's a genre film, but just the subtlety that he brings to this performance, which could have just been an arrogant cartoon character performance, it's phenomenal. I don't know if you feel the same way, but I was like blown away, as if I'd never seen the movie before.
Yeah, like there's a shot, he's in his apartment and he's lost his job. And I want to say he's getting kicked out of his apartment. But there's a shot where he's like looking at the letter and the look on his face is so desperate and sad. And I was thinking like, I don't remember, I don't remember this movie having this kind of behind the scenes desperation, right? Like this guy is at the end. And yeah, you're right. I mean, his performance is amazing. He's always, even when he's not that great, he's always really good. Like he's in my favorite Twilight Zone episode, People Are the Same All Over.
I don't remember. I've probably seen it, but I don't remember it.
Well, in that one, he plays an astronaut who is like kind of cynical and he's going to go to the moon or Mars or something. And the guy he's with is like, you don't need to worry about it. Like if we run into anybody, people are the same all over. It's going to be okay. And they crash land and he is on this other planet and people are really nice to him. Okay. Like he meets people, they're really nice to him. They set him up in this nice apartment and stuff. And he's like, oh, this is, Joey was right. People are the same all over. And then it turns out he's in a zoo. Like the walls open up and all the people are like watching him and there's a plaque and he was like, oh, I think the guy's name is Jefferson. He was like, Jefferson, you were right, Jefferson. Sorry. But anyway, yeah, Ronnie McDowell in this movie, he is amazing. And I had forgotten, I knew he was in it, but I had forgotten how big a role he plays. And like, he transforms. I mean, he's the main character, right? Even though the movie's not about him. He's the one you're watching. And he's the one who like changes. And like, he becomes a hero. Yeah, I mean, I was very moved by his story too. I didn't really care about William Ragsdale that much, and was like, my first thought was like, I thought he was a better actor than this. Like, I remember him, I remember him being better, but I really was moved too. And about the colors, right? I also saw it on TV, and I remember it being a dreary. I mean, it did pop a lot, and I bet all these movies are brighter than like they all are probably brighter than I remember.
Yeah, I mean, that's last year I was watching a number of like Hammer films because different companies were putting them out on Blu-ray, so you get to see the high def treatment. And those are very colorful movies. You kind of think of them through this almost like the fog of the Moors or something like that, as being these drab affairs, but they really weren't in a lot of cases. And even in the movies within a movie that Peter Vincent hosts in the Fright Night film, we see clips of them and they kind of cheese them up a bit, like Peter Vincent, vampire killer. He's going after a vampire, and he raises his hammer, and then he raises the stake, but the stake is backwards.
Yeah. Right. They're like they're supposed to be like really bad films, right?
Yeah, but I was almost disappointed because it looked like they'd nailed the look and the wardrobe of those Hammer films, but then they kind of turned into a cartoon where those movies
Right.
weren't really cartoonish. They were
No.
very serious affairs as far as they could be.
Yeah, they're not. I remember them not being like knowing or not even having like. I remember them being pretty grim. The one I remember is the Mummy one with Christopher Lee, who is like a reincarnated. I don't remember the plot, but I remember thinking I watched it maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and it was grim. I mean, the colors were great, but it wasn't like those movies. It wasn't a joke, right?
Yeah, I kind of get that feeling as you see sometimes with people getting not nostalgic, but people who want to reference older horror movies, like even ones from the 80s and the 90s, like, oh, they were so cheesy. Like, no, that's just the lens of modernity kind of tainting your perspective.
I find a lot of I mean, there's some great horror movies made every year, don't get me wrong, but I find the tone nowadays to be often disenchanting and almost bored. Like there's nothing new. So, and I hate that. I would much rather the charm. I like the charm of a scrappy movie that doesn't have enough money and like it like is still doing it,
And I think, I don't know what the budget was of Fright Night, but it didn't strike me as something that was a low budget affair.
No, I didn't mean that. It wasn't low, but it wasn't a low budget, but they were clever in how they used a couple of sets, and there's only a couple of exteriors shots. And I mean, it works. The movie works. But it wasn't an expensive movie to make.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I liked Amanda Burse, who I didn't put this together because I hadn't seen the film in so long. When I was a kid, my first exposure to her, as I imagine a lot of people's, was through Fright Night. But then 2 years later, she shows up as Marcy on Married with Children.
That's right. Yeah.
So in Fright Night, she's playing maybe 16, 17. Yeah. And then 2 years later, she's playing someone who's in like her early to mid 20s, like the kind of like conservative newlywed who moves in next to the Bundys.
What's funny is I kept thinking, I know this actress really well. What was she in? And I try not to like look people up right away. I try to like in my own head, and I couldn't remember where she was from. It's funny, Married with Children. God, because I watch that show all the time.
Oh yeah, I was a big fan of that show. I even bought the comics when they came out. They had Married with Children comics for a brief while. It's weird. But no, and that's something that I didn't really put together because I was a kid, and all these people, when I'm, 9, 10 years old, people who are in high school might as well be in their 40s. But watching it now, especially the scene where Amy, who is Charlie Brewster's girlfriend, Charlie's the guy who's the vampire moves in next door. They're on the run from this vampire, and they go into a nightclub, and Amy, let's be generous and say she's 17.
Yeah.
Ends up being seduced and doing this like erotic dance with this guy who's, he's probably several hundred years old, but he's played by an actor who's probably in his, 30s or 40s.
Sure.
I'm like, I get that the actress herself was 27. I mean, this is like this weird Back to the Future tangle of spaghetti, I think, all wrapped up to hide the fact that this is a really inappropriate thing I'm seeing on screen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when I was a kid, I didn't interpret it that way. I was just like all nightclub scenes when you're like 9 or 10, they're scary and weird. And I always thought like, why would anyone want to do that? That looks horrible. But I will say that nightclub scene is really well filmed and very effective and erotic. I don't know if it's exactly erotic, but it is definitely charged. It's a charged scene, but it's weird. I mean, and then he's like hiding out, and he's going to kill this neighbor to hide out. But then he ends up like, publicly smashing these two guards, and the whole place erupts into pandemonium. Yeah, it was weird. It was, you know what about this film? There's like weird choices that are made that I like, but like it's like a singular. This was not market tested, or you could tell, right? Like they just like did, like they told the story. It does not take obvious steps until the very end.
Yeah.
But like when the minion melts on the stairs,
Yeah.
that's comes out of nowhere.
It does. Now, let me ask you about that, because he is what is, I think, known in the vampire lore as a familiar. He's like the servant of the the vampire,
Sure.
right? He just gets shot in the head, I think, by
He gets
Peter Vincent, right? But then
yeah.
Jerry Dandridge, the vampire played by Chris Sarandon, kind of stares into him and makes his
Yeah.
body ambulatory. Is he just a zombie at that point, or did this guy have some kind of powers that he would have stood up anyway? What did you get? That always confused me.
I mean, I think he's a zombie, except when he liquefies, when they kill him the second time and he liquefies, it's like that's putrefaction or something. But it's weird because he's only been dead like 30 seconds.
Yeah, and he turns to sand like you'd see in,
Yeah.
you'd expect like a zombie or somebody really old to do.
But doesn't he melt like first and then
Yeah,
he turns into sand? Yeah.
Yeah, he starts to decay and then he melts, then he emits green goo, then
Yes.
sand, and then like a smoldering skull. And I love that he dies on a staircase. So all of his bones kind of explode down the staircase, and then this sort of signature of this film, it's not horror and it's not comedy, but it's cool because you see the skull slide across the floor and like bump into a dresser or something like that.
Yeah,
It's just
great.
like this little capper, right?
Yeah, it's great. And the green goo was very unsettling. I mean, it looked like a guy actually melted. I mean, to me, I was like, this looks real. This looks like they melted a guy and then his bones turned to sand. So I think that I think he's like an ancient familiar somehow. I think he's been like kept alive through some vampire magic. And then when he's brought back to when he dies the second time, the spell's broken. The sand is a giveaway, right? He's old.
Yeah. But what I liked about him is that him and Jerry, they seem to be best friends. I don't think there's anything else necessarily going on there,
Right.
but they've been together a while and they have this sort of almost a wacky rapport.
Yeah.
I love that, when Jerry locks Charlie in the upstairs bedroom with Amy, who is in the process of becoming a vampire, he screams, and they're just down in the basement doing something with the coffins. They're like, I think she just opened her eyes.
Yeah, I know.
Thing.
Yeah, they're like bowling pals or something. Yeah, the way they hang out.
Exactly.
Because there's a couple times where they look at each other and they're like, yeah, it's his role is weird. I mean, I don't.
Especially the Jonathan Stark is the actor who plays Billy Cole, the familiar. When Charlie brings the cop to the house to investigate a dead prostitute who he's sure is in, body's been disposed of the property, he's right, except that he's trying to tell the cop that it's a vampire. When that information comes out and the cop just becomes incredulous, like, I can't believe you drugged me here for this. Billy is getting into it like, whoa, vampires, are you sure? He's a wacky dude, but then on a dime you can see just that intense, murderous, we're gonna come after you, kid look, which it's not only is it a nice subtlety in the performance, but also in the writing, because you could just see this guy as being very stiff, like, oh, officer, no, this is ridiculous. But no, he's playing into it to seem just like a goofy, avapal, regular Joe.
I mean, it's my favorite scene in the movie. And I like horror movies when like other people don't believe what's going on for two reasons. One, that's how everyone would act, right? If any of your friends showed up and said, my next door neighbor is a vampire, you would be like, I don't believe you, right? And two, to me, there's something dramatic about like what do you do when you have no one that's going to help you and no one believes you? But yeah, that performance, because he here's what I think, right? Like the good vampire movies play on the fact that they are old creatures, so they've seen everything before, and they're sophisticated and bored. And I think that they are theatrical, right? Inherently. I mean, every good vampire novel or movie, the vampires tend to be, they're almost like actors. And I think it's because they've been around forever and they're bored.
Yeah.
And it's like a performance, right?
It really is. And I think that when Jerry Dandridge meets Peter Vincent, he says, I've seen all of your films and find them quite amusing or something like
Yeah.
that. I totally believe it, because it's weird, because you get the feeling that Dandridge is putting on a performance and that he's got to keep his cool around everyone so as not to blow his cover, but he kind of geeks out around Peter Vincent just a little bit. So I could just imagine him and Billy Cole sitting around that mansion or wherever they'd lived before, just watching these vampire movies
Yeah.
and just laughing their ass off, or, oh, they got that run, right or wrong, or how did they find out about that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I work in public schools and I often watch like school movies, I mean, I would imagine vampires would want to see the vampire films. Like, yeah, they how did they know that? How did they know that I like, yeah, anyway. To me, the guy that stood out as both, he's amazing as the vampire and terrible as the teenager, is Stephen Jeffries, right?
Yeah.
So I know this actor from 976 Evil, where he plays a guy who gets turned into a demon. It's a weird film, but he ends up like being the monster in the movie. And here I was like, man, this guy's hamming it up. He's killing me. Whenever he was on screen, I was like, this is like, it's too much, right? But then when he's the vampire, I was like, this guy's amazing. He's like great as the monster, as the vampire,
Yeah, going back to those comics they made, they made comics of Fright Night as well, that went on for a long time, and
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was a Chicago publisher called Now Comics that did both Married with Children and Fright Night. Yeah, and so in the comic series, which went on for dozens and dozens of issues, they brought Evil Ed back because he's kind of teased at the end of this first film as a character, as this sort of like, he's trying to be the new Jerry Dandridge, but he's not quite successful at it. So that's kind of funny. But yeah, I get you. I like the look and the idea of Evil Ed as a teenager more than I like the execution, because he's got that high pitched kind of obnoxious voice. I feel like if that had just been his vampire persona and he was more of just kind of an obnoxious, but in a different way, little dweeb, because when Jerry turns him or offers to turn him, he's like, they won't bully you anymore. They won't make fun of you. I think they needed like one or two more shots of the high school life, because he and Charlie are best friends, but you don't get the idea that they're best friends because people are bullying them and they have no one else to cling to.
Right.
He's even watching it now, that line always kind of rung like, Jeffries sells it, because you can see that he's really eager to be like, wait, they're not going to bully me anymore. And he's crying like, oh my God, this is kind of great. But the story itself, I don't think that they were focused on other things working on this script than Evil Ed's origin.
Yeah, there's like a scene or two missing from high school, right? Because we don't get any sense of the way of their lives in the high school, really. When Jeffrey's character, we needed to see like a football player like bump him with the shoulder or something, Yeah. Or say like, hey, screw you, man. They needed like a little thing for sure. But I was just, it's he's so, honestly, I thought I don't really talk about actors that much when I think about movies, but I thought he was amazing as the vampire. I thought he was really good, but terrible as the teenager. And I was like, man, this is weird. Like, he's so good and so bad in the same movie. But yeah, I think I need to rewatch 976 Evil. I wonder if it's the same kind of, I get the sense it's the same kind of performance.
I think you're right. He's a bit different when he turns into the demon character, because he doesn't have that. Well, I haven't seen the movie in probably 25 years, but I think his voice is deeper. The main thing I remember is he goes into this poker game after killing two people. He says, I'd like to enter the game with a pair of hearts.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah. What I remember is he goes into the bathroom and there's someone hiding in the last stall, and he's like smashing in the doors, boom, boom, making his way to the last door. But yeah, the Two of Hearts is the pair of hearts. That's awesome.
976 Evil, because Robert Englund directed that. And I remember thinking, because I love Stephen Jeffries from Fright Night, I was like, oh God, this guy is playing a demon in a movie directed by Freddy Krueger. Can't miss. And I just recall being deadly bored during the entire thing. I don't know what it was.
I mean, I watched it at the right time. Yeah, again, all these movies, I love them all. Like I like most of the movies I see anyway. But then, like I saw The Hearse on Saturday Nightmares, which is kind of known as a turkey, like a movie not many people have seen. It's a turkey. This woman who moves to the country and she keeps seeing a hearse. It scared the shit out of me when I was like 9 or 10. I mean, and I saw like Psycho 2 and 3 on Saturday Nightmares. Those are bad films, and because I've rewatched them recently, they're not good. But I was buying what they were selling at when I was like 12. Yeah.
Speaking of Psycho 2, I watched Psycho recently for an episode, comparing the book to the movie, and then I looked up some Psycho 2 clips. And yeah, the scene when the sister gets the knife through the face in the basement. My God, talk about a difference between two films. You've got Hitchcock, who's like showing everything through clever editing and being all artsy and stuff about it. And then you've just got this really bad, like 1982 prosthetic knife through the face, and it's all gross. You see everything.
There's no charm. I mean, they're not only charmless, they're kind of mean-spirited, and I guess you could say the original Psycho is mean-spirited too, in a way, but like they're gross. I don't know. They're gross. They're like not. They're crass money. They're just trying to take your money. They're going through the motions. They have bad casts, and Anthony Perkins was such a strange actor anyway, and to see him like revisiting this character through these these not good directors. I don't know. They're yeah.
Well, I think he actually directed Psycho 2, if I remember, or maybe he did 3. I can't recall, but
I don't remember.
Yeah, but it is weird because I don't think the first Psycho is mean-spirited. I think it is a movie about unfortunate confluences of events, bombarding people at vulnerable points in their lives. But then, 2 and 3, there is this sort of like, let's turn this kind of a classic, thoughtful horror movie or suspense movie into a slasher film.
Right, and it doesn't work. And you're right. Psycho's not mean-spirited. Frenzy is mean-spirited, right? Hitchcock's, which I like that movie. I'm one of the only most people hate it. I think it's great, but it's a mean. Have you seen it?
No.
Hitchcock, one of his later films, Frenzy, follows a serial killer in England called the Necktie Killer. And you know who it is when you're watching it. And then there's the wrong man, like they arrest the wrong guy. So you have these kind of couple of stories going on. But Hitchcock shows this necktie killer strangling a woman, and then the camera tracks out of the apartment, down the stairs, and out into the street while the murder's happening. So it's a good film. But when he's strangling this woman, it's terrible to watch. It's really disturbing, way more disturbing than that woman getting knifed through the face in Psycho 2.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can see that being an effective thing, but it's the kind of effective that when I see something really realistic, like a graphic death on film, or not even a graphic death, but someone suffering through being murdered or drowned or whatever, it's bothersome to me.
Yes.
It walks that fine line of like, wow, I'm watching great, effective artwork, but I feel like garbage.
Yeah, like they used to, killing people on stage was against the law, right, back in the day in plays and stuff. And I know why. I watched John Webster's The White Devil, which has it's the Texas Chainsaw Massacre of the Renaissance. There's like bodies everywhere, but a guy gets poisoned and then strangled on stage. And I'm watching it, and the guy gets strangled for about a minute and a half. They're like, have a rope around his neck, and he's like, ah! And it was one of the worst things I've ever seen, And I kept thinking like, oh, I get it now. Like they could have just had him die off stage. And like, yeah, we strangled Johnny. That would have been better.
But talking about spectacular deaths, and Stephen Jeffries, the end, hell, Roddy McDowell, when Evil Ed gets turned, I had forgotten that it happens almost immediately.
Yeah.
He turns up as a vampire at Peter Vincent's apartment, and Peter lets him in because he's like, "Oh, this is my friend Ed, who's
Yeah.
just realized along with me that there are vampires. Let's have him into the place." Uh, he turns on him, and there's a great conflict where Peter grabs a crucifix and burns it into Evil Ed's forehead. It's sort of like a sideways angle, so it's more of an X than a cross. Ed flees, and then shortly thereafter, Peter goes to the vampire's house, gets scared, runs to Charlie's house to find his mom. Mom's not home, but Ed is. And that wonderful struggle where Ed takes the form of a wolf and charges down a hallway at Peter Vincent, who's just been like, I think he's fallen into a table. And wouldn't you know it, there's a giant plank of wood, one of the legs, it's perfectly steak shaped, lifts it up as the wolf is lunging at him. And then the wolf and Peter Vincent go over the railing down to the main floor. And this horrific but beautiful transformation. And I guarantee that if it had been any other actor than Roddy McDowell, who knew exactly what to do in this scene, he's horrified, he's curious, he's scared, but he's also emotional because he's watching this, again, 16-year-old kid who's been turned into a monster dying in front of him as he reverts from a wolf into like more of a vampire creature back to a naked version of himself. This scene goes on for, it must be like 3 minutes of screen time. It's the most captivating thing I've seen in a while from a movie that's like 35 years old.
Yeah, I mean, when the wolf, he impales the wolf and it like flame goes over the banister or something, and he looks down and you see the dog's kind of the wolf's whining, and it's like back legs aren't working, and it's kind of like, and it hit me hard. I mean, I love dogs. Like I responded to this scene very emotionally. I was like, oh my God. And the transformation, honestly, it was superb. It looked like a real wolf. It looked like a real vampire wolf dying and turning into a guy with the X burned into his flesh. I couldn't believe what I was watching. I was like, man, I don't remember this being this, but there was something about the animal suffering turning into the human suffering that I agree. Like, it was, I would not call this movie a powerful film, right? I don't think about it that way. So it's just kind of charming, but that scene like really, really worked and was, it was beautiful and very, very unsettling to me.
Especially because there's still some great acting and writing. I don't know if this is something the actors worked up, Jeffries and McDowell on the day, or if this was in the script, but it's a great moment when the wolf vampire is sort of like midway through transformation. He looks more demonic, but he's still got some hair, and he's reaching out, and Peter Vincent is reaching out to him as well, because he's like, I know this is a kid. This is not, just some brainless monster. But you can see that the vampire portion that has taken over Ed is still in there. And you get the feeling if he could grab Peter Vincent and chew on him for a little bit, he might be able to make his way out of this thing.
Right.
And then you see that Peter Vincent realizes what that, reaching out motion, the double meaning of it. And you see him pull back, and he feels really bad about having to pull back. Is all of this stuff going on in the matter of 20 seconds.
And it almost felt like, I started out by saying like, it's like there's 3 deaths in the movie and then there's like the rest of the movie. It almost felt like they like had these deaths in mind and then like built the movie around it or something, because each one of these deaths, right, the familiar and then Evil Ed, like with the wolf transformation, and then the last one, they're like 2 or 3 minutes each, right? They each last a long time, and they are the stakes feel high. It's not like a Friday the 13th where it's just like let's just get rid of these people. It's like, it's high. I don't know, and they're fighting for life, right? Each one of them uh, and your sympathy shifts for a minute. Yeah, you don't want Evil Ed to die. I mean, you know, like.
Well, especially because like with Billy Billy Cole, the familiar we were talking about earlier, I didn't want to see him die just because the performance was so fun. He's a
Yeah,
scumbag, and he's probably killed hundreds or thousands of people
sure.
in his years of servitude. But he's also, yeah, he's working for it. He's struggling as you know, even as a zombie, he keeps coming back. There's that wonderful shot because Peter Vincent keeps shooting down into him. He's creating all this smoke on the stairwell, so you can't tell what's going on. You see him reach up through the
Yeah,
mist. It's a great like little jump and a horrific moment. That's the thing. When I was a kid, this movie scared the hell out of me. Now I understand that it's technically a horror movie, but it's just something I watch in kind of amazement. It's almost like a horror fantasy in a
yeah,
way.
yeah. I mean, the stained glass window. That what I remembered from a kid was a kind of effete vampire, um, William Ragsdale, and the stained glass window. Like these are the things I remember. I knew, and Ronnie McDowell, but I didn't really remember that he, you know, much about it. And revisiting it now, it's Ronnie McDowell's loneliness, right? These monstrous creatures that don't want to die, like fighting for their lives, and the stained glass window. Yeah. I mean, you know, because it's so prominent and it's so weird that it's in this film, you know, but I don't know what it means, but it works, you know.
It is a weird choice because I just didn't quite get it. When we first get into the Dandridge house and you see that stained glass window, they had established that Billy was the live-in carpenter. That was like his cover. So Jerry Dandridge apparently has a lot of money and a lot of things from his world travel, so he needs a guy to come and fix up the house and make it all fancy for him. But I wondered, was that stained glass window something that he had brought with him from Europe, or was this
Yeah.
a fixture of the house that they moved
Yeah.
into?
I mean, I think you're supposed to like, it's supposed to be the old world that you're seeing, but they're in the suburbs of like, did they tell you where they are? I don't even know where they are. I thought they were in Ohio or something.
Well, this is a question I have for you because I thought I was losing my mind halfway through this picture. Because it is like this cookie cutter kind of suburban town, you know, very charming to use your word, which I think is deadly appropriate. But at one point, I think it's right after they figure out that Dandridge is a vampire. They do the vampire test on him. Peter Vincent drives away scared because even though everyone is convinced that there's nothing to see here, he drops his compact, he
Sure.
picks it up, and he can't see the reflection of Jerry Dandridge in it. So he gets freaked out and goes away. Uh, Charlie and Ed say, "We've got to walk Amy home." Their
Oh
walk
yeah, I
home
forgot this scene. Yeah.
their walk home, they end up like they go from this suburban quiet tree-lined street. All of
Sure.
a sudden they're in these weird like maze of back alleys
Yeah.
and there's a nightclub. They're very clear. No city, no neighborhood exists in this. Like, what is
Yeah.
this?
I forgot about that scene where they, yeah, like it's like they're in Escape from New York or something. It's like these dark, long, um, like warehouse district, you know. And I was thinking, like, where does she live? Like,
Yeah.
she lived like,
And why didn't she drive or take the bus or something like
yeah.
that? Yeah,
No,
I
so
could.
you're right. I forgot about that scene. That clearly they're in a, yeah, it's got to be like Pittsburgh or Cleveland or I don't know. Like, I mean, they don't tell you. I don't think they tell you where it's set,
No, I don't think
and I
so
think they
either.
do that on purpose, right? Because they want it to be everywhere, right? But that that's a peculiar. No, I know what you mean. In fact, I had like even kind of forgotten about that. Like they're clearly supposed to be right abutting an urban area.
But that's, yeah, and it's all through editing and everything. But it's
And
like,
he's
yeah,
like, let's shortcut through the alley, right? And like he like first off, I mean, what what kind of shortcut is gonna like how much time are they gonna save going through some dark alley? But he's like, hey, let's just take the shortcut through the alley, right? And he was like, no, he's gonna get us there. And yeah, that sequence is strange. Yeah.
also when Ed separates from Charlie and Amy, and then Dandridge comes after him, I don't know that much about like big city alleys because I stay away from them. But during this chase, we've seen this chase 100 times in other
Sure.
movies, usually involving like a cop and a drug dealer or something. He's running and kicking over garbage cans and jumping over
Yeah.
boxes and stuff. But when he finally gets to the dead end, I'm like, all right, do they really design alleys to just like go down a long stretch of and just end in another brick wall with no way to get over? It's like 12 feet high. It just seemed like some weird Freddy Krueger
Sure.
nonsense.
Yeah. I mean, no, I've never, I take alleys all the time. It's right. I never, I mean, I guess Chicago's different because the alley's like a grid, but sometimes you'll dead into like the river. But I don't think I've never seen an alley that just dead ends into a brick wall. But but I mean, I do think at that stage, we're in the metaphor. It's like, it's supposed to be sort of an abstracted city space. I don't think we're really supposed to be like, like my cousin always watches movies and was like, he's always trying to dissect, like, there's no way the guy could have shot him out that window because he was on the third floor, like he's always like thinking that way. I'm like, yeah, but the movies don't work that way. Like they're not,
You know what?
not,
I understand where you're coming from, but I also understand where your friend's coming from because I've been doing a year-long series on the Friday the 13th franchise, and every episode I come back with like a handful of weird theories or questions that I understand that they're not meant to be answered because no one was thinking about these things when they were
Yeah.
putting these movies together.
Sure.
But damn it, I can't turn off that part of my brain.
Yeah, it's like Room 237, the Shining documentary, which I watched twice.
Oh,
Because I thought it was actually a lot of fun to watch on its own, but there were people who'd made like diagrams of the hotel, like blueprints, and they were like, there's no way there could be a window right here in this office. And I was like, that's not how movies are fucking made. Like there's a series of sets. They don't, I mean, they're not normally filming in an actual hotel, right? Like anyway.
well, but in defense of Room 237, which I love,
I loved it. No,
yeah.
don't misunderstand. I loved it. I watched it twice. I mean,
But
I thought it was great.
But I think one of the reasons people were able to give credence to that particular set of conspiracy theories is because Stanley Kubrick was known for being so meticulous.
Sure.
So like, this is not a guy who randomly throws stuff in, into a movie. It's got to mean something. It doesn't have to mean anything, but
right. Well, I just
understand.
think the exigencies of like working on a time you have a calendar, you've got a series of shots you got to get. Even a meticulous filmmaker, I think there are accidents. Like I remember in Room 237, like there's a shot with this chair and then it's not there. And the person was like, no, why isn't this chair there? And I was like, why? A prop guy moved it. And they went back and shot it and someone got their ass chewed out, but anyway, like, well, do you want to talk about the director of Fright Night for a minute?
Sure.
So it's Tom Holland.
Tom Holland, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I feel a personal connection to him because he wrote the screenplay for one of my all-time favorite B movies called Class of 1984. He wrote the screenplay. I'm pretty sure he wrote the screenplay. He didn't direct it or anything.
Okay. I haven't seen it.
Okay. So, well, first off, how everyone has a movie or two that's their movie, mm-hmm. right? Like, do you have, like, what's a movie you have that matters to you, but like no one else seems to care about?
Oh my gosh. I don't know if I should say this. Why not? Freddy Got Fingered.
Okay. Oh man. There could be like a 10-hour analysis. Okay. So, well, for me, Class of 1984 is this early 80s, it's sort of a remake of Blackboard Jungle, but instead of reaching the students right through like analogy and understanding them and empathy, the teacher essentially ends up killing them all, but it's awesome. It's like they're trying to kill him but it's really grim. And I watched it when I was like 8 years old. It's got Michael J. Fox in it, and he gets stabbed in a cafeteria. And I thought, this is what high school was like. I mean, my whole life until I went to high school, I thought people were like forcing drugs on you in the bathroom. You got stabbed in the cafeteria, and they were like the ganged up hoodlums, you know.
Did you ever petition your parents to be homeschooled?
No, but you know, my dad was watching it on TV, and I was watching it, and I was fucking horrified, you know. And I might have been, I was 8, but anyway, I'm pretty sure he wrote the screenplay for it, and I like this movie. I love this movie, and I honestly don't really know why. Ronnie McDowell is in it. He plays a science teacher. Ronnie McDowell's in it, and he's great in it. He's he drinks at work, and you know, he's always like, the kids these days, they're terrible, just ignore them. But and then this director, he directed a couple of films, right?
Mm-hmm.
Didn't he? His big movie, didn't he do Child's Play?
Did he? Oh my gosh, I should.
Am
know
I
this.
mixing up my people? I think he did Child's Play.
Hold on a second. I'm gonna go look this up right on the
Double
YouTube.
check.
Yes. Do me a favor, vamp for a second. Just because. Oh, wait a second. I'm getting
I'll
a note.
talk about.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, he wrote Child's Play.
Okay, so he wrote Child's Play, right? So, Child's Play to me might be the perfect horror film. Okay. Because it has like layers of horror to it. It's kind of fun. It has a great, the voice of Chucky's a great actor. Yeah, what's up?
Also wrote and directed.
Okay, so yeah.
For some reason, I'm sorry, I should know this, and I think I did. It's just that there was a splinter. I'm like, I thought there was someone else involved in it, but no. Yeah, so yeah, Tom Holland's the man.
All right, so to me, Child's Play it has a charm to it, right? It's also really disturbing. It like holds up. It's a scary film, and none of the subsequent movies have come anywhere close to it. It's just been it had this idea that it did really well, and then like, you know. But there's an idea of like, when you're a kid, your toys like turning on you is disturbing. Dolls like looking at you or following you around, that's like a scary thing for most people. And then being like trapped inside this like inanimate object is also like, no one thinks about it that way, but it's also scary. And I love Child's Play. I mean, I adore that movie. And so this guy had a hand in Class of 1984. This movie, I don't think he directed it, I think he wrote it. This movie that I just absolutely love. I try to watch every other year. Child's Play, and then Fright Night. And I know he was like a name for a while, and then he wasn't, right?
Yeah, I know he's popped up in. God, I should really know more about this, but I know Adam Green, I think, had him like as a cameo in Hatchet 2 or one of his horror films in more recent years. But yeah, Child's Play, I'd completely forgotten that connection because Chris Sarandon played the detective in that movie.
Yeah.
So it all makes sense. I've got. We haven't really talked about Chris Sarandon as the vampires, so we should do that in a second.
Yeah,
but
let's
first,
talk about Chris. Yeah.
First, I want to step outside of that to a meta context and just say that I met Ronnie McDowell once, and I met Chris Sarandon once, and they're completely different, polar opposite experiences. Ronnie McDowell was doing a play in Chicago while I was in art school, and I was waiting for a bus. I was like walking downtown, just going through stores, and he passed me, and I was like, "There's no way." And then I looked and I was like, yeah, that's him. So I went up to him. He was waiting for a light to change. And I introduced myself and I said I was a big fan of Fright Night because I think that at that point, that was the only thing I knew him from. Yeah. And he couldn't have been nicer or sweeter guy. And then I met Chris Sarandon at a convention, an event at which I paid him to sign a poster for me. And he could not have been less interested in being there like, at all.
He looks like an asshole, right? Let's be honest.
I was heartbroken.
I know. I mean, like, I always thought Ronnie McDowell, because he always plays kind of, there's like a perversion to his acting or something, that I always thought he was going to be a creep, but supposedly he was a famously nice guy, right? Like loyal, generous, helped people. Chris Sarandon, I've heard nothing about, but he looks like a fucking asshole, right? I mean, just look at his haircut. You're like, oh, this guy's like a jerk. You know what I'm talking about. It's like, there's just a touch too much attention, even for an actor. So I think he's really good in this. I think he's good as playing a kind of cold-hearted manipulator. Like he could have had a whole career just playing these roles, right?
Yeah, and what's interesting is I watched Child's Play, I think it was earlier this year, to talk about on another, like as a guest on another podcast. Maybe it was last year. But I had forgotten how good Chris Sarandon is in that movie, playing a completely different kind of. He's the hero cop,
Yeah,
but there is sort of that same distance to the role. I loved him as Jerry Dandridge. I never
me too.
noticed until watching it yesterday how much Jerry Dandridge loves some apples. Did you catch that? He's like
Yeah, it was
every
weird
scene.
because vampires, yeah, and they're not. And a lot of times they don't really eat regular food normally, right? Like, yeah, clearly there's supposed to be some symbolic importance to him eating apples.
I also caught that, there's that it's a device that shows up later in the movie, but earlier on, I think it was when Charlie goes into the house, you see all the grandfather clocks that I guess he's
Yeah,
collected from over the centuries. That's a really nice touch, and it kind of says something about the way vampires feel about time, because it's obviously very important to them, as we find out later.
sure.
But it reminds me of another movie from 1985 involving time, Back to the Future, which opens with that great tracking shot of all the
Yeah, that's right. Of
clocks.
all those clocks, man, I didn't think. Yeah, what was going on in '85, man? People were obsessed with time.
Yeah.
Like, I just remember he has a great kind of when Ronnie McDowell puts the cross to him in the kind of penultimate scene, and he was like, "You have to have faith for that to work." And then William Ragsdale does it, and he goes, like,
oh. He was having some kind of an episode. Like
yeah,
it looks
yeah.
ridiculous, but it also looks authentic. Like, well, maybe that is how,
Yeah,
how they would react.
Yeah, to me, it was actually it worked. I mean, it was like it was weird because it was theatrical, but it worked. I mean, he was like, yeah. I don't know, like I associate him with the 80s, so like he's perfect for an 80s horror movie. He's like perfect for an 80s vampire, you know. And Child's Play, you're right. I had kind of forgotten that he's the hero in that, but like I don't know. I can't even think of any other movies he's in. I know he shows up here and there.
Princess Bride.
Oh yeah, he's the villain in that. Of course, that's his famous kind of role.
Yeah, it's weird
He's
because
good in
like,
that.
yeah, he is, but I think he gets kind of overshadowed by Christopher Guest, who's because Sarandon plays the king, but it's more
Yeah,
Christopher Guest is like the underling. He's the one who killed Inigo Montoya's father. Spoiler alert. So he kind of gets
yeah,
the bigger billing. But yeah, I mean, Chris Sarandon, I love that when he comes down the stairs in that climactic scene, he says, "Welcome to Fright Night." Doing the imitation of Roddy
yeah,
McDowell. It just he's got this real sinister thing to him where he's annoyed with these kids, but he also kind of wants to toy with them. And then he realizes too late that he really shouldn't have let them in, because even though
right.
he's much smarter and has more experience than they do, they're kind of fumbling their way through defeating him. But because he let down his defenses and was so arrogant, that was allowed to happen.
And Roddy McDowell's character knows how to defeat vampires, right? Like he actually has the skill set. I mean, it works. His stuff works. And you're right. Like they let him in. He lets them in thinking like it's some old actor and some kids, but it's not really the case.
Which, if you think about it, knowing if he really has watched all these movies, he should understand this guy just by accident could have all the tricks he needs to defeat him.
I know. I mean, he has his case. Like he carries his yeah.
It would have been really cool, and this is probably something that you'd see more in a remake they would come out with today, which we can talk briefly about the remake from a few years ago. But it would be cool if there's a vampire movie in which nothing was true in terms of how to defeat the vampires, like the bats, the sunlight, all of that stuff. But in terms of like crosses and garlic, and like, what if someone found themselves completely unequipped with dealing with the vampire and had to come up with the ways to defeat them, which would become the lore moving forward?
Yeah, I mean that sounds like a pretty good movie. I mean, I'm trying to think. I've seen so many vampire films. I'm trying to they all Innocent Blood is a weird one. I don't know.
Mm,
It might be bad. I haven't seen it in 25 years, but I remember it kind of having like, it didn't feel like other vampire movies really. Um, Dark. Wait, what? Near Dark? No. What's Catherine Bigelow's?
yeah, Near Dark. Yeah,
Near Dark. Yeah, I mean that's sunlight gets them right, but like
yeah.
they don't feel like vampires really until later in the film. Um, no, you're right. I mean that would be, yeah, be a good film.
So did you see the remake from a few years back?
I yes, I tried to watch it for this podcast, but I had it on hold at the library, but I never got it. I didn't get to rewatch it, but I have seen it, and I remember it being better than I was expecting,
Mm-hmm.
but less. Again, the charm had been leached out of the film, and Colin Farrell, who has turned out to be a really good actor, right? But I didn't like him when this came out. This was before he's made all those, like he made The Lobster and Killing of a Sacred Deer. You know, he's made some good, really, really good films the last couple of years. But you know, I remember thinking, like, why did you guys remake this movie? That's not. I mean, it was pretty good too. I just remember, yeah,
I was in the same boat because this was around the era when everything with a brand name and a nostalgic vibe was getting remade. I'm like, not Fright Night.
yeah.
But I thought
Why?
Colin Farrell, and I haven't watched it since seeing it in the theater 8 or 10 years ago, but I thought he was pretty excellent as a new take on Jerry Dandridge.
Yeah,
I liked that they moved the setting to like at an abandoned or an undeveloped like Las Vegas kind of suburb, kind of tract home thing. Um, the only thing I didn't really care for, I think, was Christopher Mintz-Plasse as the new Evil Ed. But I thought Anton Yelchin was great as the new
he
Charlie
was
Brewster
great.
because
He was great, but
he also
he was a
looks
great actor. Yeah,
right, and because he also looks, because I think he was like a high school student,
yeah.
unlike 25-year-old William Ragsdale.
He was a
Um,
rare. To me, yeah, he was one of the great young actors because he was so likable,
yeah,
and all the movies he made, all the ones I was like, man, he's good. Uh, yeah, the remake. I mean, again, I'm speaking from about 5 years out now. I remember it being pretty forgettable. I do. It was ill informed. To me, it was ill informed. I mean, you know, they could have just made a vampire movie with the same cast, and like they could have done their own thing. I don't know. I don't know what remaking Fright Night brought to that project.
I yeah, I'd have to watch it again, but I feel like I don't know that it did that well, and I think part of that might have been because the audience that didn't know anything about Fright Night, they didn't care. The ones that did care about Fright Night, they're like, I'm not going to watch a remake. I'll just watch
Right.
Fright Night again. So it never
Yeah.
really had a
I
fair
mean,
shot.
right. And it would be like remaking House. Um, you know, these kind of one-off, kind of quirky horror movies from the 80s. I don't see any reason. I just don't see any reason. I keep making vampire movies.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like, why? I just don't. I would say it looked better than I was expecting.
Yes.
I was expecting it to just be like, just be great, you know, just bad. But it was, yeah. Yeah. I mean, my theory, basically, they should only remake bad films, right? Like, that's all they should do. They should remake bad films. The film's good, don't remake it. Leave it alone. Uh, and I, you know, of course, I thought doing a live action version of Beauty and the Beast was a mistake. So, I mean, that's why I'm not a studio head, because that movie made like $1 gazillion. I would have been like, nah, we're not going to do that. It's not, you know.
I think that all comes down to business decisions because they're like, well, if the movie came out and it was a flop, why are we going to, risk pouring $20 million into putting it out again? Whereas something that's a proven brand and,
Sure.
marketplace, whatever, you've at least got a chance of making your money back plus a couple of bucks. But I'm with you. I think, you've got movies that have a very specific creative stamp that people respond to, just let that thing be and resurrect something else that didn't really have a chance. Because kind of like with the Fright Night remake, it wasn't a bad film. It's just that I don't think it quite had the right audience. But there are other movies out there that just didn't get a chance because they were good films that people just, for whatever reason, didn't react to. That you could either re-release them or
Sure.
remake them.
Or they
That
were
kind of a
bad
deal.
films that had good ideas, right? Which is
Mm,
often, it's like, you know, a movie that just doesn't really work. But it doesn't work because you had the wrong people making it. Um, I mean, you know, I like, like I love the original Black Christmas. The movie scared the shit out of me. I think it's a
Yeah.
masterpiece. I didn't even see the remake because when they were talking about it, I was like, you know, I read some interviews of people involved, and I was thinking like, why would you remake like a perfect movie? Like, why you're gonna fail? Like, you're not gonna be able to improve like the movies, like or like the original Halloween, which they keep failing. They keep trying to redo it, and they keep failing because the movie is almost perfect.
Well,
Like,
it's just we were talking about Psycho, you know, Gus Van
yeah,
Sant shot by shot remake from
yeah.
'98.
I
Like,
saw that in
yeah,
the theater.
I did too, unfortunately. Oh God.
That was a weird experience for me because I've seen Psycho a lot even before I'd seen that. I loved Hitchcock when I was a kid, and uh, I didn't know. I was like flabbergasted that it got a major release. Even I was like 20 or when I was 19 or 20 when it came out, and I was like, why? What the hell is going on here? I mean, it's the same film with 1 or 2 seconds added in. And I
And
like Gus Van Sant. That was bizarre to me.
yeah, that's a whole other conversation, I'm sure.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
but so kind of wrapping up the original Fright Night. Do you have anything like kind of closing thoughts or anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to talk about? Because I think we've gone over it pretty thoroughly.
You know, the thing that I thought was interesting, you know, a lot of people, when they look at horror movies from the 80s, they say, like, if a character has sex, they're doomed. And if they don't, they're going to make it to the end. And the movie starts with, you know, the two teenage boyfriend girlfriend like fumbling through in the bedroom, and he like tries to touch her breast, and she's like, you know, don't do that. And he's like, we've been together for a year. And then she gets in the bed and takes her shirt off. She's like, okay, I'm ready. And he's like looking out the window at the neighbor, like carrying a coffin, right? The guy bringing the coffin in. And then from that moment on, every time she wants to be affectionate with him, it's a great running gag. He's like drawn to this mystery of the vampire next door. And then at the end of the film, they vanquish the vampire and they're in bed together and they have the TV on. And I thought it was like perfectly of its era in like what was happening. And also it was a really funny running gag that like he's right to be distracted, right? I mean, there's a vampire living next door, but the thing that he wanted to like sleep with his girlfriend, he like loses interest immediately when he like sees some real life horror. So there's something interesting going on with that.
Right. It's almost the opposite of what happens in like certainly a lot of movies of the era, which is sex is such a distraction for these people that that's what ends up kind of getting them killed. Whereas he is solely focused on
Right.
not getting killed, that he
Right.
neglects the sex. But I somehow have forgotten about that whole kind of running theme, because I really do like William Ragsdale and Amy versus Amanda versus
Yeah.
interactions,
They're great.
because she really is the perfect kind of jilted girlfriend. That
Yeah.
scene, you know, right after that scene with the coffin, she storms out and runs downstairs and she starts yelling. She's like, first you want to make love and now you don't. And then Charlie's mom is like
Yeah.
2 feet away saying,
Hey
what's going
guys,
on, kids?
what's happening? Yeah.
But just
That was great.
and then you get the sense that like their families are really close. It's like, oh, tell your mom I'll be there for poker night or whatever. And she's like, oh, sure. And then she says, I'll see you later, Charlie. And he's looking out the window with his binoculars, and you can just see the hurt and the frustration on
Yeah.
her face. It's this constant emotional roller coaster. You feel so bad for Amy throughout this film. So you
Sure.
almost, when she's being seduced by the vampire, you wonder how much of this is his hypnotic powers and how much of it is, wow, finally a real man is giving me attention.
Yeah, a man who's like going to pay attention to me. Yeah, I mean, so my final thoughts, I guess, would have to do with that. Is that the movie? It holds more cleverness inside of it than I was expecting, and it's not all like a kind of wink to the audience. Like, it's a horror movie that has horror movies inside of it, right? that's not really, that's like a separate thing. In fact, I really was moved by the characters, as you said when we started. And I guess I would say it's, if you've seen it, you should rewatch it. And it is worthy of study. You know, it is a worthy film. And a lot of times you can't say that when you revisit the movies from your childhood, right? You can't say it. You go back and you go, oh, this is terrible. Or, oh, this movie's like so racist. I can't believe I watched this. But in this case, right, or whatever, right, sexist. In this case, I was like, man, this movie's pretty rich. And it still delivers the gore and stuff. But yeah, it has fascinating stuff inside of it.
Yeah, well, perfectly said. And that encapsulates everything I think I wanted to say at the end too. So Ben, where can people, aside from pre-ordering, again, the South never plays itself, where can people find you, follow you? Give us your info.
Well, I don't do much with Twitter because I think it's ruining the human race, but I
smart man
have I have a website, bwbeard.com. I try not to interact I try to spend my life online. I mean, I have to be able to write books and stuff. I feel like I have to kind of like keep myself separate from that. So I have a blog too, Simone and the Silver Surfer, which I've been writing about COVID. I've been keeping a kind of COVID diary of the arguments I get in with my wife, her like awesome cut downs, she's very funny, of me, and then also like books and movies that I'm watching, books that I'm reading, and the work I've been putting on The South Never Plays Itself. Because we just finished the final edit last week. I mean, it's at press now, but we were like at the last, you know, there was a lot of, I mean, there's a lot to the book. It's complicated. And there were a lot of pieces. And I added a little, the publisher thought I needed to add a final film. Do you want to know what movie I did?
Yeah.
The Florida Project, which I did not have in there.
I still haven't seen that.
Okay. It's not in your copy. It's not in the advanced review copy because I just wrote it and put it in last week. Okay. But it's a great film. I mean, it's formless. There's no plot, and it's a marvel. And the publisher was right. It's kind of a summer. It's like it pulls together a lot of strands. So anyway, yeah. And I'm gonna be back here, right? And I have some book talks, events, other podcasts and stuff, but I'm an outsider. I'm a nobody. So
well, you're somebody to me. If that matters.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you. That means a lot. Yeah.
All right. Well, cool. Well, first, congratulations on bringing this book home. In terms of the final edit and everything, I look forward to reading that last section and finishing the first part of my journey.
Yeah.
And then talking about it next month. And yeah, thanks for talking Fright Night. I feel like if you'd like to come on and talk about other movies at some point,
anytime you have an empty slot for any movie, just invite me on. I'd love to. I could do this all day.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you again. And yeah, we'll talk real soon. So take care.